Elias Thorne dismissed the faint cries as childish tantrums. His empire, built on algorithms and innovation, felt impenetrable, and he often thought, "My home is secure." Then, a tiny voice choked, raw with terror. "Please, cleaner! I can't breathe!" What he saw next made his detached world crumble forever. The hushed elegance of the Thorne mansion usually offered a sanctuary of quiet, a stark contrast to the relentless hum of the city he navigated daily. Elias, a titan of industry, had returned from a whirlwind business trip a day earlier than expected, a rare indulgence born from a fleeting, almost forgotten urge to simply be home. The grand foyer, usually buzzing with the soft movements of staff, was eerily still, save for the distant, almost imperceptible sound of a child's whimper, echoing faintly from the upper floors. He paused, his expensive leather briefcase thudding softly onto the polished marble. A curious knot forming in his stomach, the whimper grew, becoming a strained, desperate gasp, the kind that spoke of profound distress rather than a fleeting tantrum. He climbed the sweeping staircase, each step amplifying the growing fear in his chest, a sensation he hadn't truly felt since the devastating loss of his beloved wife during the birth of their second child. The sound now was unmistakable, a child struggling for air, followed by a chilling, choked plea that tore through the opulent silence. "Please, cleaner! I can't breathe." The words, sharp and desperate, sliced through his composure, igniting a primal terror he didn't know he possessed. Elias didn't hesitate, his long strides carrying him down the hallway towards the nursery, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The door, usually ajar, was firmly closed, a barrier that suddenly felt menacing. He threw it open with a force that rattled the frame. The scene that unfolded before him was a tableau of stark horror, etched forever into the canvas of his memory. Lily, his precious 6-year-old daughter, stood trembling in the center of the room, her small frame rigid, her face tear-streaked and crimson, struggling to draw breath. Her tiny hands clutched desperately at her chest, where a thick, ornate sash, usually reserved for decorative drapes, was cinched tightly around her waist, constricting her movements and her very breath. Her wide, terrified eyes, usually sparkling with innocent joy, were now pools of fear, fixed on the figure standing over her. Maria, their seemingly devoted housekeeper, stood with an unsettling stillness, her face devoid of any warmth, her eyes cold, observing Lily's struggle with an unnerving detachment. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips, quickly vanishing as Elias's thunderous entrance broke the macabre spell. Maria spun around, a practiced mask of concern instantly replacing her cold demeanor. "Oh, Mr. Thorne! You're back so soon!" she exclaimed, her voice a sudden flurry of feigned surprise and false warmth. "Lily was just being a little dramatic, playing a game. You know how children are, always so imaginative." She moved swiftly, her hands reaching for the sash, her movements almost too quick, too efficient, as if to erase the evidence. But Elias had seen it, the sheer terror in Lily's eyes, the way her small body had convulsed with the effort to breathe, the chilling indifference in Maria's gaze. He pushed Maria's hand away with a silent, steely resolve that surprised even himself. His own hands, usually accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar deals, now fumbled with trembling urgency to loosen the cruel knot that bound his daughter. As the sash fell away, Lily gasped, a ragged, shuddering breath that filled the room, and she collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably, burying her face into his expensive suit jacket. The silent nursery now felt suffocating, filled only with Lily's ragged breaths and Elias's dawning horror. He held his daughter close, his gaze sweeping the room, landing on the ornate crib where his infant son, Leo, lay, his small face flushed, his cries unusually subdued, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor running through his tiny limbs. A doctor's visit later that evening, prompted by Elias's gnawing unease, confirmed his worst fears. Subtle, barely visible bruises marred Lily's delicate skin, and Leo's unusual distress was attributed to a persistent, though mild, dehydration and a general state of anxiety. The doctor's words were clinical, yet they ignited a terrifying suspicion in Elias, a cold dread that solidified into a chilling certainty. Something deeply wrong, something profoundly evil, was at play within the walls of his own home. This incident, raw and brutal in its revelation, shattered Elias's carefully constructed denial, tearing away the veil of grief and work that had shielded him from the truth for far too long. The world he thought was secure had crumbled, and a new, terrifying reality began to take hold. The grand, cold walls of the Thorne mansion seemed to echo not just with Lily's fading sobs, but with the silent lament of Elias's own fractured heart. 2 years had passed since the world tilted on its axis, since the vibrant laughter of his beloved wife, Eleanor, was cruelly extinguished by the profound, irreversible loss that arrived with the birth of their son, Leo. Elias, a man who could command markets and shape futures with a single word, found himself utterly adrift in the wake of her departure, the joy of new fatherhood tragically intertwined with an unbearable sorrow. He had sought refuge in the only realm he knew how to master, his work. The labyrinthine corridors of his tech empire became his sanctuary, a place where logic reigned supreme and grief could be compartmentalized, pushed down, and ignored, at least for a few fleeting hours each day. This relentless pursuit of professional conquest, however, came at a devastating cost, leaving his children, Lily and the newborn Leo, to navigate the vast emptiness of the mansion largely without a consistent parental presence. Lily, a spirited girl of 6, whose bright eyes and quick mind mirrored her mother's, had felt the shift acutely. Her father, once a playful presence, had become a distant, shadowy figure, his touch fleeting, his words often preoccupied. She missed the warmth of his hugs, the comforting rumble of his stories, and the easy way he used to make her laugh. Young Leo, barely a toddler, knew only the detached care of a grieving father and the constant, seemingly gentle attention of Maria, their housekeeper. Maria had arrived shortly after Eleanor's passing, a beacon of efficiency and quiet competence in a household plunged into disarray. Her demeanor was impeccable, her references sterling, and her initial interactions with the children were marked by a surprising tenderness that seemed to fill some of the void Elias unwittingly created. She spoke softly, moved with grace, and anticipated every need, quickly earning Elias's trust and becoming an indispensable fixture in their lives, the very fabric of the household seemingly woven by her capable hands. Yet, beneath Maria's veneer of unwavering dedication lay a chilling ambition, a cruel avarice that twisted her seemingly selfless acts into calculated manipulations. She watched Elias retreat further into his world of algorithms and spreadsheets, observing his guilt-ridden absence with a calculating glint in her eyes. The mansion, grand and imposing, became her stage, and the children, Lily and Leo, her unwitting pawns in a sinister game of financial exploitation. Maria harbored a deep-seated resentment, a feeling that life had dealt her an unfair hand, and she saw Elias's immense wealth as a karmic imbalance she was destined to correct. She saw not innocent children in need of love, but instruments through which she could pry open the vault of the grieving millionaire, believing his emotional detachment made him blind, weak, and utterly vulnerable to her machinations. She meticulously observed the routines, the finances, the emotional landscape of the Thorne family, weaving a web of dependency and subtle control that tightened imperceptibly around the vulnerable children. The early signs were insidious, almost imperceptible to Elias's grief-clouded eyes. Lily, once so outgoing, began to exhibit a quiet wariness, her laughter less frequent, her gaze often downcast. She would cling to Elias for a moment longer when he was home, a silent plea in her small embrace. Leo, the infant, frequently cried with an unusual piercing intensity that Maria would soothe with practiced ease, often dismissing it as colic or teething, while Elias, consumed by his own internal battles, simply accepted her explanations. Maria's control extended beyond the children. She meticulously managed the household staff, ensuring no one questioned her authority or witnessed her true demeanor. She maintained a delicate balance, presenting herself as the epitome of loyalty and care, even as her true intentions festered beneath the surface, transforming the sanctuary of the Thorn home into a silent prison for its youngest inhabitants, all while Elias remained tragically unaware, lost in the echoing chambers of his own profound sorrow. Girl screamed, "Please clean her, I can't breathe." Suddenly, the millionaire made a shocking decision. The terrifying incident in the nursery had ripped through Elias's carefully constructed world of grief and ambition, leaving him exposed to a chilling, undeniable truth. His detached existence, once a shield against the pain of Eleanor's departure, now felt like a cruel betrayal of his own children. He watched Maria now with an unnerving intensity, his gaze peeling back the layers of her seemingly benevolent facade. Every soft word she uttered, every gentle touch she bestowed upon Lily or Leo was scrutinized, filtered through the prism of his newfound suspicion. He noticed the subtle shift in the children's demeanor whenever Maria entered a room, Lily's small shoulders tensing, Leo's infant gurgles quieting into an apprehensive silence. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a gilded cage, its opulent silence punctuated by a growing sense of dread. Lily, once a vibrant child who filled the grand halls with her playful echoes, had retreated into herself, her spirit dimmed like a flickering candle. She spent hours in her room, a solitary figure amidst a sea of forgotten toys, her eyes often fixated on the window, as if yearning for an escape. Elias would find her clutching a worn photo of her mother, her small face etched with a sorrow far too profound for her tender years. He would try to coax her into conversation, into laughter, but her responses were often monosyllabic, her gaze evasive. Sometimes, when he held her close, he would feel a faint wince, a subtle stiffening of her tiny frame, and though he searched, he could never find a visible mark to explain it. He knew Maria would always be nearby, her presence a silent, watchful shadow, her voice always ready with a plausible explanation for Lily's newfound shyness or Leo's persistent fussiness. Maria, with a chilling mastery, perfected her dual role. In Elias's presence, she was the epitome of a devoted caretaker, her movements efficient, her tone solicitous, her concern for the children overflowing with practiced sincerity. She would bring him meticulously detailed reports on their day, their meals, their naps, painting a picture of a perfectly managed household. Yet, Elias began to notice the fleeting moments when her guard would slip, a momentary hardening of her eyes as she looked at Lily, a sharp, almost imperceptible tug on Leo's arm as she lifted him from his crib. He would sometimes hear hushed, scolding tones emanating from the nursery, quickly replaced by a saccharine sweetness the moment his footsteps approached. He even once saw her quickly close the nursery door, a subtle click echoing through the hall, claiming Lily needed undisturbed rest, even though he had heard a faint whimper just moments before. The children's distress manifested in increasingly unsettling ways. Leo, who had once been a robust, cheerful infant, now suffered from recurrent night terrors, his small body racked with silent tremors, his cries often muted by a strange, almost fearful reluctance to make noise. Lily, meanwhile, developed a peculiar habit of hiding small, cherished items, a favorite hair clip, a tiny drawing, in obscure corners of the house, as if protecting them from an unseen threat. Elias, his heart heavy with a crushing guilt for his past blindness, started to piece together these fragments, each one a tiny shard of glass reflecting Maria's true nature. He felt a burning need to understand, to uncover the insidious truth that had festered beneath his roof, a truth that had stolen the light from his children's eyes. His grief, once a paralyzing weight, now transformed into a fierce, protective resolve. He began to search, subtly at first, through old documents, the children's medical records, even the household accounts Maria managed with such meticulous precision. Nothing overtly incriminating surfaced, a testament to Maria's cunning. But the memory of Eleanor, his luminous wife, began to stir within him, a gentle whisper guiding his steps. He remembered her meticulous nature, her habit of leaving notes, her deep love for their children. He found himself drawn to Eleanor's old study, a room he had avoided since her passing, unable to bear the weight of her lingering presence. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the heavy drapes, illuminating shelves filled with her beloved books, her elegant writing desk still adorned with her favorite pen. It was there, tucked away in a forgotten drawer beneath a stack of old blueprints, that his fingers brushed against a thick, cream-colored envelope. His name was scrawled across it in Eleanor's familiar, elegant script. His breath caught in his throat as he recognized her scent, a faint whisper of jasmine and paper, clinging to the aged parchment. It was a letter, dated just weeks before Leo's birth and her tragic departure, a testament to her foresight, her unwavering love, and, perhaps, a premonition of the darkness that would follow. His hands trembled as he broke the seal, the paper crackling softly, revealing words that would undoubtedly shatter the last vestiges of his ignorance and arm him with the truth he so desperately sought. The weight of the letter felt immense, a direct communication from the woman he loved, reaching out from beyond her final breath to protect the family she had left behind. The cream-colored envelope, a tangible link to a love that transcended the veil of loss, felt impossibly heavy in Elias's hands. He carefully broke the seal, the delicate paper whispering secrets of a past he had tragically neglected. Eleanor's elegant script flowed across the page, each word imbued with her characteristic warmth and keen insight. She spoke of her boundless love for him, for Lily, and for the tiny life growing within her, a love that would endure beyond any earthly separation. But amidst the tender sentiments, a thread of unease began to weave itself through her prose, a subtle current of apprehension that sent a shiver down Elias's spine. Eleanor wrote of a persistent feeling, a disquieting intuition about the fragility of trust, especially when wealth and vulnerability intertwined. She mentioned a distant cousin, a shadowy figure from her family's past, whose greed had once threatened their ancestral estate, a warning veiled in a cautionary tale about those who saw opportunity in misfortune, preying on the grieving and the innocent. She urged Elias, with a foresight that now seemed heartbreakingly prescient, to always protect their children's inheritance, not just from overt threats, but from the insidious creep of subtle manipulation. Eleanor, ever the meticulous planner, had detailed certain safeguards she had put in place, obscure clauses in their family trust, and a small separate account she had created for the children, managed by a trusted, independent firm, deliberately keeping it off the main household ledgers. She expressed a quiet concern about the potential for those entrusted with care to exploit a parent's absence or sorrow, particularly if that parent, like Elias, was prone to burying himself in work. Her words were not an accusation, but a loving, urgent plea for vigilance, a desperate attempt to safeguard their legacy and their children's well-being, even from beyond her own departure. The letter ended with a reaffirmation of her unwavering faith in his strength and his love, a poignant reminder that he was capable of protecting their precious family. a truth he had almost forgotten. The revelations within Eleanor's letter were not a direct indictment of Maria, but rather a chillingly accurate blueprint for her motives and methods. Elias now saw Maria's meticulous management of the household accounts not as efficiency, but as an elaborate shield designed to obscure her true intentions. He realized that the subtle shifts in the children's demeanor, Maria's quick explanations, and her almost too perfect composure were all pieces of a terrifying puzzle. The mention of the separate children's account, unknown to him, ignited a cold fury. He immediately contacted his family lawyer, discreetly requesting a full audit of all family finances, with a particular focus on any unusual expenditures or transfers since Eleanor's passing, and a thorough review of the children's trust. He felt a profound, burning shame for his past blindness, for allowing grief to cloud his judgment and leave his children vulnerable to such calculated cruelty. Armed with this newfound clarity, Elias began his own covert investigation, transforming from a grieving, absent father into a vigilant protector. He spent sleepless nights poring over household receipts, cross-referencing dates and amounts, searching for discrepancies, however small. He started observing Maria with a hawk-like intensity, not just her interactions with the children, but her phone calls, her quiet whispers in the kitchen, the way her eyes lingered on expensive heirlooms or financial documents. He noticed her increasing possessiveness over the children's schedules, her subtle attempts to isolate them from other staff members, or even Elias himself. One evening, he deliberately left a folder of seemingly important, yet ultimately innocuous, financial statements on his study desk, only to return hours later to find it subtly shifted, a faint crease on a page that had not been there before. Maria, ever so cunning, was undeniably probing, searching for vulnerabilities, confirming Elias's darkest suspicions. His focus now shifted entirely from his empire to his home, from algorithms to the fragile hearts of his children. He began spending every waking moment he could with Lily and Leo, not just observing, but actively engaging. He would read Lily stories, his voice a comforting balm after so much silence, and watch as her eyes, though still guarded, began to hold a flicker of their former light. He would gently play with Leo, cooing soft words, letting the infant grasp his finger, feeling the profound connection that had been severed by his grief. He would hold Lily close, stroking her hair, whispering promises of protection, and slowly, tentatively, she began to respond, her small body relaxing into his embrace, her small hand reaching for his with a renewed, desperate trust. Elias understood that reclaiming his fatherhood was not just about exposing Maria, but about rebuilding the shattered world of his children, brick by painful brick, with the unwavering mortar of unconditional love. Maria, however, was not oblivious to the shift in Elias's demeanor. She sensed the subtle change in his gaze, the way his questions, though seemingly casual, now carried an undercurrent of scrutiny. Her practiced smiles became a fraction tighter, her movements a touch more agitated. She tried to reassert her control, subtly undermining Elias's attempts to bond with the children, whispering to Lily that her father was too busy, or gently redirecting Leo's attention away from Elias. One afternoon, as Elias was reading to Lily, Maria entered the room, her voice saccharine sweet, claiming Lily needed to finish her chores. Elias, his hand still resting protectively on Lily's shoulder, met Maria's gaze with a silent, unwavering intensity, a silent challenge that hung heavy in the air. For the first time, Maria's eyes flickered, a momentary tremor of fear in their depths, revealing the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. The game was changing, and Maria knew, with a chilling certainty, that her carefully laid plans were beginning to unravel. Elias's quiet scrutiny soon transformed into a calculated campaign, a silent war waged within the walls of his own home. He had installed discreet surveillance cameras, their tiny lenses hidden within decorative objects, capturing Maria's every move when she believed herself unobserved. The footage, played back in the dead of night in his darkened study, was a chilling testament to her duplicity. He watched, his heart a cold knot of fury, as Maria's saccharine smile dissolved the moment she turned from the camera, replaced by a harsh frown. Her voice a low, menacing hiss directed at Lily for a spilled toy or a whimpering Leo. He saw her deliberately ignore Leo's cries, letting the infant fret for agonizing minutes, his tiny face red with distress before sweeping him up with a rough indifference once she knew Elias might be near. He witnessed Lily, her small hands trembling, being forced to sit in silence for long periods, her eyes wide with unshed tears, while Maria meticulously counted cash from a hidden drawer, her lips moving in a silent, greedy tally. The financial audit, quietly completed by a trusted forensic accountant, further solidified his suspicions. There were numerous small, irregular withdrawals, cleverly disguised as household expenses, accumulating to a significant sum over the past 2 years. More damning were the attempts to access the children's separate trust, a protective measure Eleanor had so wisely put in place. Maria had made several inquiries, using forged documents and Elias's supposed authorization, but the independent firm, alerted by Eleanor's specific instructions, had flagged them as suspicious and denied access. The sheer audacity of her scheme, her cold, calculated exploitation of his grief and his children's innocence, fueled Elias's resolve with an unyielding fire. He was no longer just a father seeking answers. He was a force of nature, driven by an elemental need for justice. He spent every available moment nurturing the fragile bonds with his children, his presence a steady, comforting anchor in their turbulent world. He would sit with Lily for hours, building towering castles with blocks, his large hands carefully placing each piece, his gaze never leaving her face. Slowly, painstakingly, the walls around Lily's heart began to crumble. One evening, as the twilight painted the nursery in soft hues, Lily, nestled against him, her small hand tracing the lines on his palm, whispered almost imperceptibly, "Maria told me if I told you, she'd make Leo disappear." The words, barely audible, struck Elias like a physical blow, a raw, brutal confirmation of the terror his daughter had endured in silence. He held her tighter, his own voice thick with emotion, promising her over and over that no one would ever hurt her or Leo again, that he would protect them with every fiber of his being. Lily's whispered confession, coupled with the irrefutable video evidence and the financial irregularities, provided Elias with an overwhelming arsenal of truth. The police, initially skeptical of a millionaire's claims against a seemingly impeccable housekeeper, quickly shifted their demeanor when confronted with the meticulously compiled dossier. The surveillance footage, showing Maria's deliberate cruelty, her menacing gestures, her cold indifference, spoke volumes. The forged documents attempting to access the children's trust laid bare her avarice. And Lily's brave, tearful testimony, recounted with Elias's comforting presence beside her, painted a vivid picture of emotional and psychological torment, of threats and manipulations that had held her in a silent, terrified thrall. The weight of evidence was undeniable, the truth a blinding light exposing the depths of Maria's betrayal. The confrontation, when it finally arrived, was not a quiet, private affair. Elias, accompanied by 2 stern-faced detectives and a Child Protective Services officer, found Maria in the kitchen, humming softly as she polished the silver. Her face, usually a mask of serene efficiency, contorted into a snarl of pure venom as her eyes landed on the uniformed figures. "What is the meaning of this, Mr. Thorne?" she demanded, her voice losing its practiced sweetness, a sharp edge of defiance replacing it. One of the detectives, his voice calm yet authoritative, began to outline the charges, listing the evidence with an unyielding precision. As each piece of her carefully constructed deception was laid bare, the financial fraud, the documented abuse, Lily's testimony, Maria's composure shattered. Her eyes, wild and blazing, darted from Elias to Lily, who stood clutching her father's leg, her small face pale but resolute. "You spoiled brat!" Maria shrieked, her voice echoing through the grand kitchen, a cacophony of raw, unfiltered malice. "You ungrateful little wretch! I sacrificed everything for this family, for him, and this is how you repay me? With lies and deceit?" She gestured wildly at Elias, her face contorted in a mask of furious resentment. "He was never here. He didn't care. I was the one who raised them, who saw to their every need. I deserved more. I deserved everything you have, you empty, pathetic man." Her outburst was a torrent of rage, a chilling confession that stripped away every last vestige of her caring facade, revealing the twisted resentment and unbridled greed that had festered within her all along. The air crackled with her fury, a dark storm finally unleashed, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind about the true nature of the woman who had once been entrusted with the innocent lives of Elias's children. The path to justice, though painful, was now irrevocably clear. The raw, venomous outburst from Maria had ripped away any lingering doubt, leaving a stark landscape of truth in its wake. The legal process, though arduous and emotionally draining, moved with a certain inevitability, propelled by the irrefutable evidence Elias had meticulously gathered and the heartbreaking testimony of his brave little girl. Maria's desperate attempts to weave a new narrative of victimhood and false accusations crumbled under the weight of the surveillance footage, the forensic financial reports, and Lily's unwavering, though tearful, account. The justice system, slow but ultimately resolute, found her guilty of fraud, emotional abuse, and endangerment, ensuring that her cruelty would not go unpunished. The Thorne mansion, once a gilded cage, felt as if a suffocating shadow had been lifted, though the echoes of Maria's malice lingered, a painful reminder of the darkness they had narrowly escaped. The immediate aftermath was a period of fragile reconstruction, a delicate dance between healing and remembering. Elias, stripped bare of his professional armor, embraced his role as a full-time father, with a devotion that had been tragically absent. He scaled back his work commitments drastically, delegating responsibilities and entrusting his empire to capable hands, understanding that his true legacy lay within the walls of his home, in the eyes of his children. He spent countless hours simply being with Lily and Leo, his presence a constant, comforting balm. He learned to read bedtime stories with a gentle cadence, to prepare simple, nourishing meals, to patiently answer Lily's hesitant questions, and to soothe Leo's remaining night terrors with a warmth that had once seemed alien to him. Every small step forward, every flicker of joy in his children's eyes was a testament to their resilience and a quiet affirmation of his own profound transformation. 2 years later, the grand Thorne mansion, though still imposing, breathed with a different kind of life. The cold, echoing halls now resonated with the genuine sounds of a family reborn. The formal gardens, once meticulously maintained by a distant staff, now bore the charming, slightly chaotic imprint of Lily's enthusiastic, if unscientific, gardening experiments. Elias would often find himself kneeling beside her, his hands caked with rich earth, helping her plant seeds of vibrant flowers, his laughter mingling with hers as they watched a busy bee flit between blossoms. The once empty dining room, where meals had been silent, solitary affairs, now hummed with conversation and the clinking of cutlery, a symphony of shared moments. Leo, now a boisterous 3-year-old, would often regale them with tales of his imaginary adventures, his innocent voice filling the space with pure, unadulterated joy, while Lily, her spirit fully rekindled, would lean against Elias, her small hand instinctively finding his, a silent testament to their unbreakable bond. Elias had found solace not in the acquisition of wealth, but in the quiet, profound moments of fatherhood. His eyes, once haunted by grief and the cold calculations of business, now sparkled with a deep, abiding love. He had learned that true richness lay not in the vastness of his fortune, but in the boundless affection of his children. He cherished the mornings when Lily would sneak into his bed, her small body curled against his, and the evenings spent teaching Leo how to draw clumsy stick figures. The memories of Eleanor, though still tinged with a gentle sadness, were no longer paralyzing. Instead, they were a source of quiet strength, a reminder of the love that had brought his family into being, a love that continued to guide him. He knew she would be proud of the man he had become, the father who finally understood that his greatest achievement was not an empire built on technology, but a family rebuilt on unwavering love and truth. The mansion's grand kitchen, once the scene of Maria's final, furious outburst, was now a vibrant hub of activity. Elias, surprisingly adept with a spatula, would often cook with Lily, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings as they attempted new recipes, often with hilariously messy results. Leo, perched on a stool, would watch with wide, curious eyes, occasionally reaching for a stray piece of fruit or a spoonful of batter. These simple acts, these everyday moments of shared warmth and connection, were the true architects of their new reality. The subtle bruises on Lily's skin had long faded, replaced by the healthy glow of a child cherished and protected. Leo's anxious tremors were a distant memory, his days filled with carefree play and the secure knowledge of his father's loving presence. The family, though scarred by the past, had emerged from the crucible of pain with a renewed sense of purpose, a testament to the enduring power of unconditional love to heal even the deepest wounds. The journey had been long and arduous, marked by moments of despair and overwhelming guilt. But Elias had faced his demons, confronted his past negligence, and ultimately chosen the path of redemption. He had learned that true strength was not found in avoiding pain, but in confronting it, in protecting those he loved, and in rebuilding a life shattered by loss and betrayal. The mansion, once a symbol of his isolated grief, was now a vibrant sanctuary, a home filled with laughter, warmth, and the tangible presence of a family united, thriving, and deeply connected. The journey had been long and arduous, marked by moments of despair and overwhelming guilt, but Elias had faced his demons, confronted his past negligence, and ultimately chosen the path of redemption. He had learned that true strength was not found in avoiding pain, but in confronting it, in protecting those he loved, and in rebuilding a life shattered by loss and betrayal. The mansion, once a symbol of his isolated grief, was now a vibrant sanctuary, a home filled with laughter, warmth, and the tangible presence of a family united, thriving, and deeply connected. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Elias sat on the porch swing. Lily nestled beside him, her head resting on his shoulder, while Leo chased fireflies across the manicured lawn. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming night jasmine and the innocent giggles of his children. Lily looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight. "Daddy," she said softly, "we're a family again, aren't we?" Elias pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Always, my love," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Always and forever." He watched Leo stumble, and then bravely pick himself up, a symbol of their own resilience. Maria's darkness was a fading memory, replaced by the boundless light of their renewed connection, a testament to the truth that had set them free and the love that had healed them. This story, a whisper of both profound pain and soaring hope, reminds us that even in the deepest shadows, the light of truth and unconditional love can pierce through. It shows us that justice, though sometimes slow, will ultimately prevail, ensuring that cruelty is met with consequences and kindness finds its reward. It's a powerful narrative about the unwavering courage of a child and a father's journey back to himself, guided by the purest form of affection. What would you do, truly, to protect a child from harm? How far would you go to ensure their safety and happiness, to rebuild a world shattered by injustice? Share your thoughts, your own experiences, and let us remember that every child deserves a sanctuary of love and protection. For it is with truth, courage, and unconditional love that justice is truly built, creating a world where every child can breathe freely, enveloped in warmth and security.